Welcome to the Power 365 show. Full show notes for this episode can be found at nz365guy.com/320. Go there and get the notes. Before we chat with today's guest, here's a quick message from our sponsors. Well, I'm the sponsor for today. If you want to go to the next level in your career or business and need someone that has been there, done that, consider taking me on as your coach. You can express interest if this is something that you'd like to do at nz365guy.com/coaching. And with that, let's get on with the show. Today's guest is from London, England. He works as a Dynamics 365 solution architect at Microsoft. He's a certified practitioner of human-centered design, so think Catalyst. You can find him on Twitter at Oli Ward. Oli, welcome to the show.
Hey, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Mate, I did not know till I got into the research there about your HCD experience.
Yeah, it's fairly new. I was lucky enough to get on a course for it about sort of 18 months ago. So it's sort of pretty new to me, but did it with the Luma guys. So learned a lot around sort of problem definition and human-centered design as well. And just before the pandemic hit, I was able to run my first 3 workshops using some of those new skills, right? But that was literally days before it all hit. So all the playback following that was done remotely. But it's a great experience.
What are the kind of the tools that you like the most, and like whether it be journey mapping, or in your own words, what are the tools that you definitely would pull out in a workshop because it's effective in getting good communication, from those involved?
Yeah, sure. We did one of the ones that I found that was particularly useful was sort of after the problem definition, when we were thinking about ideation, that side of things. Doing a bit of a matrix around kind of complexity and value. And that just kind of really helps focus individuals and kind of teams in terms of, actually, if we solve this problem, that would give us a great return and we could do that pretty quickly versus, okay, I mean, this might be, something small, but actually to deliver that, it's going to be quite complex. So it just helps focus people in kind of the areas which are going to deliver the most for them. Nice. So yeah, definitely enjoy that exercise. I think that's always worthwhile.
With your Catalyst experience inside Microsoft, what do you find the mapping between HCD, what you learned in your course, and what Microsoft is really focusing on from a Catalyst perspective nowadays? Yeah,
that's a really good question. I think, to be honest, some of my Catalyst experience is fairly limited around the HCD side of things. I've only had the opportunity to run those sorts of workshops a couple of times. But yeah, I mean, I'd love to start to explore that more. And yeah, when I've got that experience, mate, I'll come back to you and let you know.
I like it. Anyhow, tell me about what you do when you're not working, and where you're based in the UK specifically, within London, that type of thing. And what do you do for fun?
Yeah, sure. So actually, I recently moved away from London. So I was living in London for about 8 or 9 years. And about 2 years ago, moved back up to Birmingham. So for anyone not familiar with the UK, it's kind of 100 miles north of London. Somewhat, that's a smaller move than I know the kind of 12,000 miles you moved back, Mark. But yeah, we settled up here kind of last year, and we had a little girl arrive in the kind of middle of all the chaos of the pandemic. So we're a happy but slightly tired family of 3. But she's been really positive focus kind of come into our lives, right? She's a lot of fun. So it's a lot of work, but she's a lot of fun as well. So
how old is she?
She's 9 months old now.
Wow.
So she's sort of been standing recently, crawling, pulling all the stuff off the shelves, all that kind of good stuff. I think.
Awesome.
I'm sure a lot of parents say that, but for someone so small, she's got a really big personality. So she's good fun.
A lot of fun. Mine's 6 months old, so you're 3 months ahead of me.
yeah. I'm sure that's been a journey as well. Congratulations.
Totally. Thank you. Yeah, it's so much fun, right? So much fun. I love it. Time to have another one, I think. All the women go, yeah, because you actually don't do much. You don't do all the work. Yeah. So when you're in London, east, south, west?
So when I was in London, I was mostly kind of West London. So I was living around sort of Ealing way for most of my time down there. Which I really enjoyed. It's a lovely kind of lots of green space around there, but there's some really great little sort of independent businesses and places to get out and eat, and you can get out and run along the Thames. That's probably the one thing I miss actually having moved up here is not being able to just hit the towpath on the Thames and go and run down there every weekend. Yeah,
so true. So how did you end up inside Microsoft, inside technology? What was your journey there?
Yeah, sure. So goes back quite a way, really. I think I did a computer science degree at university, so technical degree. And between my second and final years in that degree, I did a year in industry, and I was actually lucky enough to kind of wrangle a job at Microsoft for 12 months as an intern. And when I got offered that, I had the choice of two teams. I spoke to each of the managers, and I chose what turned out to be the CRM support team. Paul, the manager at the time, really sold that to me. I'd never heard of CRM, but he talked to me about the product, kind of how it's used, spoke to me about the kind of team and kind of what I could expect from the year. So I kind of threw myself into that. I know people like to think about how long they've worked with the product. So I guess that was kind of final days of version 3 and the early days of version 4. Yeah.
Wow. What was the most diverse use of it that you came across in that time there, like of the platform not being used just for sales or customer service?
Cool. Do you know, that's so far away now. I can't remember. I mean, I spoke to so many partners and customers during that time. I can't remember. I remember there was a company that deals with rights management for music. And they were using that to kind of, I think they were using it to manage kind of licenses that they'd given out for music licenses.
Wicked.
So that was quite interesting,
very cool.
right?
So what happened next?
So after that, obviously, I went back to university and left, completing my degree. Left at the kind of height of the financial crisis, which was a difficult time, right? And I kind of always felt like I wanted to go into a consultancy type role. And I went for a role as a junior at a Microsoft partner. It was a great opportunity, right? It was kind of mid-sized partner, gave me an opportunity to learn my craft as a consultant, and started my time on support, which I absolutely nailed because I'd had that year at Microsoft. But then started to get kind of fed, bits of kind of configuration work and build work on CRM and on the platform from other consultants. And then over time, started shadowing workshops and design documents and design sessions. Just built up that experience, and then to the point where I was able to kind of run my own projects or run my own workshops first of all. I did that for kind of 6 or 7 years up until the point that I moved across to Microsoft when I was working as solution architect at the partner. Just felt it was time for something new and a bit different. And I'd heard about a role in the BizApps kind of technical pre-sales team in the UK. So a switch from delivery to pre-sales really appealed to me. That just felt like a kind of different skill set to learn, different kind of angle to go from partner to vendor as well.
Yeah.
And when I joined, it can be quite overawing joining somewhere like that. You suddenly realise how great all your colleagues are, and I felt like I had a lot to learn from a pre-sales perspective. But some of my experience stood me in good stead. But it had a manager that really was great in terms of kind of nurturing me and sort of really helping the team understand that pre-sales is a skill, right? It's not something that anyone can just do.
Totally. When you say pre-sales as a skill, what do you need to bring to bear? I mean, just as some background of my entire career has been pre-sales, but in yours, what do you reckon were the kind of key skills? Because I often, have this comment from consultants that they're like, I want to go into pre-sales. What do I need to know? What would your response to that be?
Yeah, sure. I think you sometimes when you're working projects, you're quite kind of in the detail and you're thinking about delivering the next thing or the next kind of sprint or whatever it might be that you're working towards. And I think moving across to pre-sales, you kind of have to step back a little bit and think about almost why does that project exist, right? So what is my customer's strategy? What are their pains in this particular area? And then more importantly, what's the outcome that they're trying to achieve? So what's the value that needs to be delivered back to them as an organization by investing in, whether it's Dynamics or some other technology. And I think you kind of get this great mix of the tech side, the kind of business and the value side, but also you get an opportunity to do some of that kind of creative element of helping envision what that new working way of working might be, or that new solution might be, being those, technologies that you've got a grounding in. So I think that's what appealed to me about it, was that good blend of, kind of strategy, value, but also technology as well, and a little bit of creativity in there too.
Yeah, nice. So what's your current role involved?
Yeah, so I mean, that is kind of my current role in a nutshell, right? I'm a technical specialist, which is kind of Microsoft speak for technical pre-sales. Mm-hmm. So as I said, work with customers to understand their strategy, particular areas of their business potentially, what their pains might be, the outcomes they need to achieve, help them envision that new way of working, primarily with Dynamics and the Power Platform. Though often we do come together with colleagues from other parts of Microsoft and partners too, Modern Workplace and Azure could get involved as well as that kind of holistic solution. And the other element might be, doing some kind of business value analysis as well. So helping that customer to kind of quantify the value of choosing that Microsoft solution. So what are they going to get delivered back? And then hopefully off the back of that, you get a nod and you get the commitment to go ahead and work together, and then it goes over into delivery mode.
Nice. So, I first bumped into you in Paddington office, and you were delivering a session there on customer data platform. Well, specifically Dynamics 365 Customer Insights, Microsoft's CDP. That would have been, maybe 2 years ago now.
Yeah, it's a little while ago.
What's your journey been with Customer Insights? Yeah,
sure. So I suppose it's a product I first encountered when it was in preview. It was actually in its previous guise. It was running as an Azure service,
yep.
And it never quite made it into general availability, right? And having had that background, spent years kind of running projects and doing that implementation. Data migration and integration were often some of the trickiest parts of a project. And I think what jumped out at me quite quickly was, I got really excited about the ability to quite rapidly bring together siloed data from different platforms and different systems about someone's customers, and create, we always think about searching for a single customer view in those kind of dynamics projects, but to truly create a single customer view that is much more than a visual, right? It's something that can be activated. And I just out of interest, really, I kind of followed that sort of preview product. I had a couple of customers that we were talking to about it, some that were trialing it out. And I had the opportunity to work with some great people that were part of that product group, as well as some people in the UK. And when it was relaunched in its current guise, as we know it now as Customer Insights, we actually created the concept of Customer Insights in a day, which is effectively kind of a set of training or an event that you can run. It's kind of a mix of positioning, but also kind of hands-on labs and kind of demonstration capability as well. So I kind of authored those labs along with some colleagues. And that content's just exploded, right? It's now used kind of globally at Microsoft to upskill technical folks. As you well know, it's used with partners as well globally to kind of help onboard and upskill those. I know you had John Weesey on recently, who's actively managing and kind of maintaining that content now as part of the broader kind of partner capability that he's doing. So, that's kind of where it started. And then I've gone on to be the kind of local expert, if you like. And I've been lucky enough to kind of position and work with some customers in the UK who have adopted or are actively looking at adopting Customer Insights as their CDP.
I like it. Let's just explain for a moment for the listeners that might not know, what does CDP stand for, and also what is it at the end of the day?
Yeah, sure. So a CDP is a customer data platform. It's effectively a type of software that's grown out of the marketing technology or MarTech space. And there's a definition from an organization known as the CDP Institute. So it's not something that's exclusive to Microsoft. It is a recognized type of technology. And that definition is that it's a packaged software that creates a persistent, unified customer database that becomes accessible to other systems. And that might sound a little bit obtuse, but there's kind of 4, potentially 5 characteristics that any CDP should have, right? So the first one is around data collection. So that is being a platform that allows you to bring together data from lots and lots of places that relates to your customer. So, lots of organizations today are probably in a slightly envious space that they've got more data about their customers than ever before, just by virtue of the fact that there's so many digital touch points and everything creates a signal. But that's fractured and broken up across in different kind of siloed systems from different vendors and political elements within an organization as well. So the first thing the CDP must do is help any organization bring all that together in a centralized place. The second thing it needs to do is what's known as kind of profile unification or identity resolution. And that is, looking at all the data you've got about all those different customer records and all those different interactions with those customers and create a single customer view. So where we've got Mark Smith from our marketing platform and our loyalty platform and point of sale, it's can we join that up to create that single record and bring all of that behavioral and transactional data together with that as well. The third thing that a CDP needs to do is offer segmentation over the top of that. So particularly for marketing type functions, because it's grown out of that MarTech space, marketers, once they've got that view of their customers, they want to be able to select audiences or subsets of those customers, groups of those customers, that they can then go on and do the fourth thing that a CDP must do, which is actually to activate or take action on those audiences. So typically with a CDP, that might be passing that segment or that audience out to some kind of system of engagement, like a marketing campaign tool or an advertising platform or something like that, where they will actually go and engage those customers within that segment and do something with it. And then the kind of fifth optional capability that a CDP potentially can have is this idea around kind of prediction and decision. So the ability to bring out-of-the-box models or potentially custom models where you can apply things like advanced analytics or AI over the top, so you can better understand those customers and potentially their behavior as well. So once you've got that rich set of customer data that you've probably never had together in one place before, can you use that to start getting predictive and understand how likely a customer is to potentially churn and leave you? Or could you work out what products might be the most relevant that you could recommend to that potential customer? Or even just understand, if you look at your customer set and you understand who your most loyal, most valuable customers are, what are the behaviors that group of customers exhibit? What is it they do in terms of engaging with you as an organization that means that they're sticky to you and they're loyal? And that can obviously inform your engagement strategies going forward as well.
Yeah. So that's interesting about, pulling that together, driving those insights and adding the predictive. So I assume it's things like, predictability around churn, propensity to buy something new, and any other kind of things you're seeing around the predictive side of things?
Yeah, there's a couple of other things as well. I mean, things like customer lifetime value is another one.
Mm-hmm.
So
yep.
Often that's kind of measured, or lifetime value is often measured retrospectively. So how much, what's the value of this customer today if they're loyal? Actually, just by understanding the behaviors that they are exhibiting or your customers are, how they're engaging with you, even if they haven't necessarily bought anything from you at that point, you might start to be able to understand what their future lifetime value might be, because their patterns of behavior might suggest that they're going to move into certain segments, that highly loyal set of customers at the top, which are potentially your most valuable customers going forward.
Mm-hmm. So, from earlier in my career, we've always talked about CRM being the 360-degree view of the customer, but you're talking about customer insights being the 360-degree view, or the unified profile of the customer. Mm-hmm. Is CRM and CDP the same thing? Are they, or is there a difference?
Yeah, there's definitely a difference. I think, like a lot of technologies, CDP's got an overlap with CRM, but it's also got an overlap with other things like master data management as well. But it does have really specific use cases and uses that differ from those other types of technologies. So often with CRM and CDP, it's more a case of that they can work in tandem. It's not a choice of one or the other. And each, as I said before, has got its kind of own outcomes that effectively will have some kind of impact on an organization's bottom line, right? So like you, I've always, in my days as a consultancy and delivering CRM solutions, we've always sought that single customer view. But I think what I've started to learn really is that The difference between CRM and CDP, I suppose, as a purpose, if you think about a CRM, you could almost, being oversimplistic, think about it as being a tool that helps you improve personal interactions with your customers. Whereas a CDP is more about understanding your customers and their behaviors. So if I expand on that a little bit, you've got, actually, let's roll this back a little bit. If you think about it from a data collection perspective, both of them are solving different problems, but they're both using data that you have collected as a first party about your customers at their core, right? So for CRM, you're likely to capture data about the customer, but it's also likely to be specific to a process, right? So you're going to be managing a customer-facing interaction, potentially selling or opportunity management, or solving a problem for that customer through customer service. And that system helps you capture data that helps ensure a positive outcome in that particular process. But then that historical data can be available that helps you kind of manage the overall relationship. A CDP is more about consolidating and managing customer data across all touch points to gain that single customer view, right? So not just what are you doing from a sales and service and potentially marketing perspective, but also data that would never really end up in a CRM. So if you think about, particularly if you've got connected services or connected products, or a subscription service where you know how your customers are using your product or service, that data is really unlikely to ever end up in CRM, right? Because there's just too much data. You can't get insight from it at that point. But getting that kind of transactional behavioral data together is actually still really valuable, right? So if you can bring that into the CDP, that gives you a much broader picture of things like how did I acquire that customer? How are they interacting with my brand or my product or my service going forward?
So that totally makes sense. You mentioned, though, there's a crossover, like we talked, CRM. What's the crossover between MDM?
So MDM, I think people often get caught up in this as well. So with CDP and MDM, where they join up really is this idea about bringing data together and identity resolution. So kind of this idea of creating kind of almost like a golden record. Now, what MDM does is, MDM can be used for other purposes other than customer data. It can be used for kind of mastering products as well. Mm-hmm. For example, if you're a retailer, you might use it to create a master set of products. But MDM will then also do things like master that data and push, that golden record back out to each system that might be subscribing with it. MDM will also pretty much only deal with who is the individual. So it'll only deal with the kind of demographic, name, address, contact details type element of it. Whereas a CDP, it'll allow you to bring that data together, do that identity resolution, but also bring with it what we would call kind of transactional behaviors. So emails, how are they interacting with your marketing, what purchases they made, potentially behavioral data as well. So how are they using your mobile app? How are they using your website? If you've got physical premises, how often do they visit? What do they do when they're there? It'll bring all of that kind of data together as well as part of that CDP element. And then secondly, it's not really about pushing data back out to lots and lots of line of business systems. It's more about allowing people within functions like marketing or product development or analysts to actually understand those customers and that behavior, and then potentially take action through a system of engagement such as a marketing platform or an advertising platform.
So can the two work in tandem?
Yeah, absolutely. There's definite examples where MDM and CDP can coexist. So you can kind of do a level of identity resolution around kind of golden records, if you like, but then pass those golden records to a CDP and have it augment with behavioral and transactional detail and allow then, the other elements that CDP brings over MDM, such as those analytical models, the predictive models, and the segmentation and the action engines as well, which you absolutely just won't get from an MDM. MDM's unlikely to be able to affect your bottom line effectively in terms of winning customers or retaining customers, whereas a CDP is much more set up for those sorts of outcomes.
Mm-hmm. If we look at Dynamics 365 Customer Insights, which is Microsoft's customer data platform, when we look at that, what when you look at your experience thus far and working with partners and things like that, and even inside the customer account, who are the typical people that are hands-on inside Dynamics 365 Customer Insight? Because it's obviously not licensed per individual; it's per record, and so who are you typically seeing? Other people building out the measures, understanding the segmentation, etc., building those segments out, maybe handing them off to marketing, that type of thing. What type of role definition do you see?
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually. And I think we get a really, really good mix of people from more of a data background. So, people that would be part of an in-house kind of data science or data analyst type function, working hand in hand with people from the business that would be responsible for outcomes like the acquisition of customers or the retention of customers or the engagement or the experience that they deliver to customers. So you get this really interesting kind of mix of skills where you've got data and analysts on one hand, and then you've got kind of marketers on the other side, or potentially heads of customer experience and things like that as well, coming together to kind of make this a reality, if you like. We see it from the partner side as well, actually. Whereas most of my interactions previously have been with kind of traditional biz apps or Dynamics partners, what we're seeing now is a lot of the partners that are really running really hard with this have got skill sets in both camps from an Azure data and AI perspective, but also from a business applications perspective. And interestingly, we've also seen a third type of kind of partner emerge that's looking at this solution, which is a lot of technology arms within advertising agencies are starting to look at this. So traditionally, they would have been delivering, they've got the understanding of kind of marketing and outcomes and customer data. They've got the experience of data platforms as well from doing this on behalf of customers historically. And now they're able to kind of deliver CDPs into the customers themselves and help them kind of own their own customer data going forward as well. So it's interesting from both a customer perspective, that kind of mix of roles, but also the kind of skill sets that we're seeing from partners as well.
Yeah. Interesting. One of the things that we hear is that you don't necessarily have to have in relationship to the, we talked about partner, then we talked about Microsoft. What about in the customer account? You talked about groups that, sit in that analytics, AI skill set area. Are you getting, when I look at the SaaS product that is Dynamics 365, it's really designed at anybody can come. In other words, it's low code in its nature, but then of course can be extended massively with Azure Synapse, for example. Are you seeing more lay people engaging with it? What's the kind of expertise level do they need to be at before they really can start driving value from customer insights?
Yeah, that's a great question. We are seeing that customer insights has definitely got a kind of a lower barrier to entry, if you like, compared to kind of other CDPs that are available. And we are seeing people with kind of more low code skill sets being able to pick this up. If anyone out there listening has worked with anything like Power BI in the past or kind of Power Platform connectors and data flows, they'll be familiar with how you can quite quickly connect. That's the same technology that Customer Insights uses to be able to connect and ingest data into the platform. So they'll be familiar with making those connections, creating those selections, and bringing the data in. And much of the rest of it is we're delivering this as that kind of finished SaaS application. So it's very much GUI driven rather than kind of getting into kind of code and heavy query languages and things like that. So you'll be quite quickly be able to do that unification process through a set of configurable rules, which you can always edit, rechange if you like. And the same for the measures as well. It's almost like building a kind of segment in a marketing platform if you're doing those sorts of experiences, which isn't necessarily the case with a number of other CDPs that are available.
Yeah. So talking about those other CDPs and stuff out there, my observation is a lot of them I use the term a black box by nature, right? They're kind of something, the data gets fed into it, something happens in there, it's behind the curtain, so to speak. We don't know what it is, and here is an output. And, it's almost like more of a managed service where they're using some tool set and say, hey, here's our CDP platform where, with customer insights, you have full transparency, full access, it's your data. Yeah, it sits in Azure data lake, you can bring your own data lake. We're not doing something behind the scenes from a Microsoft perspective that is then being offered back to the customer, right? You have that full visibility. Are there any kind of other, actually I'll add a couple more, the fact that it's built on Azure and all the certifications, the trust factor, the geo redundancy, et cetera, that we have with our platform, makes us quite unique. When you look at the competitor products out there, is there anything else besides what I just covered there that really stands out to you as what's our unique selling point and how we differentiated in this area?
Yeah, sure. So I think loosely in terms of compete, you can probably group most organizations that are in or claim to have a CDP into kind of two groups. One would be kind of niche players, people that really are kind of CDP organizations, people like Segment or Lytics, for example, quite well-established CDP vendors. Some of those will have marketing automation capabilities kind of baked in as well, sort of like BlueVen and people like that. Those CDPs tend, not necessarily all the ones I've named, but they tend to be heavily skewed towards marketing-only use cases. They're really about that marketing automation capability. Secondly, they tend to be built on kind of 2, 3, maybe 4 different technology sets, often from different vendors. So you might have a data store from, one vendor. Then you might have an integration technology to bring the data in from somewhere else. Then you might have a visualization technology on top of that to help you do the visualizations. So you're kind of already buying into kind of 3 or 4 different vendors to do that. The other side of it is exactly what you've kind of mentioned there, right? Which is some are kind of black box kind of services engagements, which means that your data as an organization, particularly about your customers and how they engage with you and use your products, is potentially hugely valuable to you and others. And what you're doing is you're allowing another party that potentially doesn't understand it quite as well as you to kind of do that work for you and hand you back the result, which you kind of have to take for granted. Whereas CI will obviously, as you said before, it's kind of all on Azure. It's all part of your own kind of enterprise data infrastructure. So you've got that control, you've got that governance, you've got that visibility, but you've also got that tool set now, which is much lower barrier to entry and a much quicker time to value, which means you can actually take ownership of how you create that single customer view, what data is used, and what value you can drive from it as well. The other side of the compete piece, I suppose, is the kind of, rather than the niche players, is more of the suite players, which Microsoft kind of fall into. But you've also got Adobe, for example, have got their own CDP on their experience platform. Again, heavily skewed towards marketing use cases, which you would expect, right? Because they kind of own that digital experience with all their other capabilities in their cloud already. Salesforce are out there in the market. They've been talking about Customer 360 for a long time. Theirs does exist, but really going a bit deep into compete here, but from a Salesforce perspective, their broader Salesforce cloud has grown through a lot of acquisitions of different products. So, for example, their sales and customer service and e-commerce platforms are actually kind of different products and therefore sat on different clouds. Whereas if you look at the Dynamics suite, it's all kind of based on top of that Dataverse. So you've already got that single platform. So the Salesforce Customer 360 piece really immediately is about helping them stitch together that customer view from across all those different platforms. It's really only focused on Salesforce data today, not so much third-party data or other sets of data that you might have around the organization. And I think SAP have recently moved into the space as well, but I'm sort of less familiar with their offering. But I suppose from a customer insights and unique perspective, we're the only one that is built from the ground up on Azure. So we're not based on multiple technologies. So you've got that governance, that scale, that control, particularly if you're the CDO of an organization, you want to know where your customer data sits, right? That's your head on the chopping block. You've got the time to value because it's that finished SaaS application. So very quickly you can get up and running with all those Power Query connectors that are built in, bring that data in, use those configurable rules to create that single customer view and those out-of-the-box models to even start to get some of those advanced analytics segmentation out of it. And then, if you are a Microsoft customer and you are using that broader data platform, if you like, you're not creating another silo of data somewhere in your organization, right? This CDP, Customer Insights, comes together on top of the Azure Data Lake. So if you are running kind of advanced Azure analytics workloads, you know that your customer data is therefore being stored in the same data lake that your broader set of Azure enterprise data is being stored in as well. And therefore your data analysts and your data scientists can access that in the same way they normally would with the same set of tools that they use day to day to kind of solve some of the tricky data problems around the organization.
Yeah. Are you coming across scenarios where customers have data locked up in legacy applications, might not have APIs on premise, that type of thing? How can you handle those type of scenarios?
And I've come across this recently, actually, with a customer, and it's a little bit tricky, right? So if there are APIs, Customer Insights is able to connect to anything where you've got a kind of a branded connector, if you like, whether it's online or on premise using the data gateways. Also got generic connectors for things like, different standards of web service or ODBC connectors and things like that. So pretty, well covered from a connector perspective. I've got a customer in a minute who has got data locked up in a platform that's effectively a managed service, and they don't have access to the APIs. So in that world, it's more of them being able to orchestrate kind of an extract and dropping it somewhere that CI can then pick that up and ingest as part of one of the many sources that it's going to pull into the platform.
Mm-hmm. So it could pick up a file like let's say a CSV dump from a system saved somewhere, maybe secure FTP, something like that, and pick up that file at a scheduled interval and refresh the data set.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that extract could be something as basic as or as simple as a CSV file, as you said, that's been dropped onto an SFTP site or somewhere secure in Azure, an Azure Blob storage or something like that. And CI can just pick that up as one of the sources that it might be pulling in as part of that ingestion.
Nice. We hear more and more of Azure Synapse Analytics coming into play in Customer Insights deals. Can you explain, first of all, what Azure Synapse is and then how it plays with Customer Insights?
Yeah, cool. So Synapse is really about, effectively it was announced kind of late 2019, I believe. And really it's, amongst other things, it's kind of the idea of a single place for an organization's data analysts and data scientists to work, right? So within Synapse, you've got access to your relational data that might be in SQL type stores. You've got access to non-relational or unstructured or semi-structured data that might be in like an Azure Data Lake or something like that. So you've got both kind of SQL and Spark capabilities within there as well. And then on top of that, you've got embedded experience for things like authoring Power BI, organizational dashboards, embedded experiences for building and authoring your own kind of predictive or AI models over the top of it. And then you've got starting to see more and more come through in terms of kind of industry tools around industry data models, allowing you to kind of focus, specific data modeling challenges based on the industry that you operate in. And I think where this comes together with Customer Insights or even that kind of Azure Data Platform more generally is that, as I said before, all the data that goes into CI and all the data that comes out of CI in terms of that single unified profile, all those measures, all those segments, all of that is stored within that Azure Data Lake. So that could be shared between both CI and Synapse. It's all stored in CDM format as well. And that means that two things really, you've got that ownership and that control of your data. You've got the scale of Azure, but it opens up a number of other use cases where, as an organization, you might want to use customer data alongside other data from around the organization to achieve some kind of outcome. And actually, I was kicking this around with a colleague of mine not too long ago who works in Azure Data and AI, and he was sort of suggesting, But one classic one that you might come across in, for example, retail or some other organizations is this idea of price optimization, where, effectively, if you're launching a product or a service, you can price it in a number of different ways. So you could do cost plus. So, how much does it cost you to produce the widget or run the service per customer? And then you whack a bit of margin on top of it. You could do a competitive look. So look at what other offerings are already available in the market, how much do they cost, and then try and fit in around that. Or you can do what's kind of basically value pricing, right? And this is where pricing optimization comes in. And this is effectively working out what your customers are willing to pay for the service. So what is your product or your service worth to the customer? How much are they willing to pay to have that capability or that widget? And the idea is that, if you're doing it on cost plus or competitive, you're potentially leaving money on the table because you're thinking about cost and not the value to your end consumer, right? But to do that kind of pricing optimization, you need lots and lots of data. You need data on your customers. You need data about the demographics that use your product or buy your product or your service. Detail about transactional nature of that, potentially qualitative stuff around reviews, churn information, what's the market demand. But you might also need product usage and kind of telemetry and that side of things as well as patterns to be able to kind of model that. It's quite I think it's quite a complex sort of algorithm. There's products out there that just do pricing optimization.
Totally.
But in terms of the data, bringing that together to actually get that outcome, you need both that customer data, and you've got that from your CDP, and potentially broader data from across the organization as well.
Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure the airline industry, right, are using these type of tooling.
Yeah, you would think so, right? Yeah.
When they set fares. What's been the impact of COVID on CDPs, and what have you seen, and particularly across the UK, maybe, but into Europe in the last year with the impact of COVID? Has there been an increased demand from customers to understand their customers better? Yeah,
that's cool. I don't have the numbers to kind of back this up, but certainly kind of anecdotally, what I've seen is in the UK, we've been in and out of lockdown kind of 2 or 3 times. And I think a lot of businesses have had to close physical premises. But ultimately, what it's emphasized kind of across industries really is the importance on retaining customers and the role that the experience you deliver to customers plays in that. As I said, lots of businesses have been closed or unavailable. So people have found kind of alternative sources for the brands and the products and the things that they might use. And there's a big question mark there for some organizations, which is, are those customers going to come back to me? Do they still have an affinity or a loyalty to me because I've been unavailable or not been able to deliver in this area? And I think it's just the pandemic's kind of really highlighted that customer experience is key. That is your differentiator, right? Above price and product, that is the key thing that we're hearing, right? And the idea that customers are going to remember how they were treated or during this period as well is going to stick with them. There's quite an emotive thing to that as well. I think a couple of things that have jumped out really in retail, a lot of the businesses kind of closed down, and there's obviously been a number of casualties in the kind of UK high street as well. Businesses that just won't be there now. Things are reopening, unfortunately. But some retailers were classed as essential and allowed to remain open, particularly kind of DIY stores. And DIY retailers in the UK had a huge boom. They've seen huge jumps in profitability over the past year. But they had to pivot really quickly to this kind of essential click and collect type model. And that actually gave them a really good opportunity to capture more customer data and learn about the customers and what projects they're on and things like that. And I think that started to highlight to them the importance of understanding more about their end consumers. I think also another example I've seen is some of the big CPG organizations. So, these are companies that make vast different sets of products, but sell them through retailers, right? Which means that they rarely know their end consumer. And if you look around online, you'll kind of see lots and lots of kind of sort of think piece articles about CPGs and that kind of conflict, which is a lot of them might be looking out there to try and create a kind of a direct consumer channel so they can learn who their own customers are. But a lot of these articles will also be saying that some of these CPGs can't really make that work. And the truth is probably somewhere in between. I think some products you probably can, there's some brands and some types of product that people really build affinity towards. If you think about things like alcoholic spirits, for example, some people will really identify with certain types of gin or certain types of whiskey, and that'll be their kind of go-to drink, right? And I think some of the CPGs out there have created these kind of discrete direct-to-consumer models where they're able to, own the experience from end to end with the customer, and try and learn about their customers as well. During the pandemic, there's been a bit of a boom around kind of premium spirits during the pandemic, but people buying those sorts of things online, that means that you start to understand actually the people that are buying my drinks, for example, does that match up to my marketing personas of the people that I've been trying to target previously? Am I suddenly seeing a new trend from a new demographic for one of my existing spirits or one of my existing products? And how do I capitalize on that? How do I make sure I'm targeting the right set of people? And that's something that a CDP can really help with in terms of spotting those emerging trends and those emerging demographics. So for some of those organizations, CPG, for example, it's created kind of another way to get to know their customers, kind of taking out the middleman as well.
Yeah. Final question I have, because I see we're quickly running out of time.
Really? Sorry.
This is great. Is in your mind, what are kind of, without mentioning the company names, because they might not have been case studied, et cetera, by Microsoft yet, but what are maybe the industries that you're really seeing adopt this technology now that have, even before COVID, maybe really started to embrace customer data platform, Dynamics 365 customer insights? What are the kind of hero stories that stand out in your mind?
Yeah, sure. So I think it's not hard and fast rule, but I think any organization that is really customer centric and thinking about experience as the kind of key way for them to differentiate, they are the companies that are investing in a CDP, right? They want to get to know their customers. They want to see changing trends in their customer behavior, potential for new opportunities for new products or services or new demographics that are emerging. And I think in that, from a hero industries perspective, I suppose you're talking about any industry really that is primarily B2C, primarily sort of medium to high touch, kind of high intimacy with their customers. Although I think there are some exceptions to that. And I think typically that falls into things like service organizations, gyms and health clubs is one that I've worked on with a couple of customers. Retailers, particularly retailers and restaurants, obviously looking to get to know their customers. And one that kind of sits outside that as well is perhaps in insurance, which is quite interesting because if you think about insurance, it's quite a low frequency of touch point with your customer, right? You might buy it and then come back 12 months later and maybe you'll renew or maybe you'll go somewhere else if you haven't had to use it in that period of time. But I think there's some appetite there with insurers because they're starting to see or understand that as an industry, historically, they've been very product-centric rather than customer-centric or experience-centric. They might sell home insurance, car insurance, travel insurance, but each of those will be its own product line with its own admin systems. And, if you've got more than one policy from an insurer, you're probably in at least 2 systems, right? Plus then you've got claims and quotes and everything else over the top of it. So I think some of them are starting to see the value of actually they're much more sticky with their customers if they know who their customers are, and they can offer things like multi-policy and multi-cover. And actually, CDP is one way that they can start to quickly identify who those customers are. But they can also then potentially identify things like white space in terms of demographics or products that they might have. And that might help them either think about, do they go to market with an existing product and target to a new demographic, or do they launch a new product that fulfills some sort of need that they've not previously been covering? So they're seeing it as an opportunity for growth from those ways as well. Yeah. I think gyms and health clubs is one I've been particularly involved in. I've got 2 customers looking at this from 2 slightly different angles, and one of them we started pre-COVID quite a while ago, and that one's actually really fascinating. What they were able to do was for the first time ever, look at their kind of membership base, if you like, bring all their members in, but then bring together, data about actually, well, how often did Mark Smith come into the gym? How often did he tap in? Or what classes did he book? And did he actually attend those classes? And then also things like what they call ancillary spend. So are you buying things whilst you're in the health club? Are you buying food, coffee, supplements, equipment? Are you paying for personal training? And they were able to do a whole load of kind of analytics over the top of that, which helped them to understand a number of things. Obviously, churn being one, being a subscription-based organization. But the other one was to use some advanced analytics over, to create some segments effectively. So they were able to create drop all of their members into 4 segments. The top segment being their, kind of champion customers. Next segment being potential champions, and then, getting lesser and lesser engaged as they go down. And they were able to understand that, those in that top bracket were, I think it was 2 to 3 times more likely, had a membership that was 2 to 3 times the length of those in the bottom bracket.
Wow.
And
wow.
they were kind of 2 and a bit times more valuable as well in terms of lifetime value. But then they could understand the behaviors that they exhibit. So those in that top bracket, how many times a week do they visit a gym? How many classes do they go to a week? How much do they spend on PT? And if you can understand those sorts of behaviors, you can then start to inform your engagement strategy for perhaps your potential champions. So you say, right, my potential champions they're nearly champions, but this guy is only going to 1 class a week rather than 2. That might help him build affinity. So maybe they'll build a class recommendation capability over the top of that, and use that, through marketing, potentially face-to-face when he comes into the gym and talk to him, or through, digital communications across, your app when you go online to check in or to book a class, and start promoting different classes to him to see if they can engage him to doing more. And obviously with COVID hitting, they've had to pivot to much more digital or kind of an online type experience as well with their customers. So they've been trying to learn from that perspective. My other customer in that space as well, they are just at the start of their CI journey really, but they're looking at it from a perspective of they run sort of local leisure centres for kind of local government across the UK, and they're looking at it from what's the returning behaviour of their members in coming back into their leisure centres?
Of course,
how does it differ from the behaviours and the usage that they were seeing pre-COVID? And they're hoping to use that to basically inform, what classes and what offerings that they focus on. But also they've got a big focus on widening participation, right? Because these are kind of community centres. So for them, they want to understand, are they serving all the demographics that they need to serve as well as they can do? Do they need to focus on, trying to bring certain demographics or certain services back in to start to build that affinity and that usage back up as well? So good.
We've run out of time for anything more at this point, but it's such a great topic to cover and learned so much from you, Oli. Who do you recommend as a guest from Microsoft? Maybe come on a future episode, either talking about the Power Platform or any really the Dynamics products.
Yeah, cool. I could definitely recommend a couple of people. So. I would say Matt Woodford might be quite an interesting conversation. So Matt was previously, he's held all sorts of jobs across Microsoft and an analyst previously, but he was the product marketing manager for business applications in the UK, and he's now running that job for Western Europe. I think he'd be a really interesting person to speak to. Another individual, perhaps either Haley Bass or Roger Gilchrist, if you've not had either of them on before. Those guys are they work as research and development with customers kind of in the field, but they feed back as part of their role in product group as well, and they're tied to Fast Track. So they might be really interesting in terms of kind of future direction of the platform, but also Haley's got a particular specialism around sales and sales AI capabilities as well. And if I'm allowed to, I know we're over time, if I can offer a third person, I'd perhaps suggest Mark Margolis might be a really interesting individual. He's a really charismatic guy. He's had a really interesting career as well, from
he has
kind of having a business acquired or a product acquired earlier on in his career, but also from a pre-sales perspective, as a technical leader as well at Microsoft. And I know he's done some great stuff around the use of technology in terms of disasters as well, and was invited to speak at the White House some years ago as well. So I think any of those guys would be fantastic guests.
Yep, I know Mark, he's been in the ecosystem a very long time, and Roger Gilchrist as well, his name, definitely heard a lot. So, hey, thanks for that. Now, I always like to wrap up with some quick fire questions. Are you ready for your randoms?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Okay, what's the most surprising self-realization you've ever had?
The most surprising self-realization I've ever had?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, mate. You've really caught me on the hop with that one. Go on.
Okay, that's all right. What have you bought that you love so much you'd buy it again?
Do you know what? I get nerdy about lots and lots of things, but during the last lockdown, I bought myself a really nice coffee machine, having missed nice coffee. Nice. So I'm getting pretty nerdy about how I grind my beans and things like that. So I'd definitely buy myself a coffee machine again if that one ever went pop.
Nice. What famous person have you met?
Famous person I've met? I've met, I don't know, it depends how famous they are. Do you know what? I saw Johnny Depp on a tube platform once. So someone passed me their phone and asked me to take a photo of them with someone, and I just assumed they were a couple. And I started looking in the camera on the phone, realised that it was this handsome, wiry guy with a big hat, and I was like, that's Johnny Depp.
Yeah.
So, that's probably the most famous person I've met, I would say.
Isn't it nuts? Like, I was living in West Hampstead while I was there, and there were at least 3, 4, 5 different locals, which were all movie stars in the area. And so you just bump into them, I was in the bookstore one day, the guy opened the door for me, and I'm going past. I'm like, whoa. He was one of the guys that Professor McGonagall out of Harry Potter and stuff. And just crazy. If you could only have 5 apps on your phone, what would they be? 5 apps on my phone. Definitely my emails, sadly. Mm-hmm. It's a little bit life admin. Spotify, I couldn't live without that. That is, like, music's a big thing I spend a lot of time doing. What else? Twitter's a little bit of a time hole for me. I think on the odd occasion where I get a bit of time, I do throw a bit of time into Twitter. Probably the Guardian News app is the other one. I think I'd struggle to come up with a 5th, but I think I'll go with those 4 for now. Nice.
That'll get me quite far.
When you were young, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I don't know. When I was really young, I would have probably said something ridiculous like an astronaut. But
nice.
No, I always was quite interested in kind of technology and building things as well. So I think I've done all right. I think I've kind of gone down the right path.
Would those around you say you're slightly late to meetings or super early?
Oh yeah, I'm late. I'm late for everything, even virtual meetings. I am late. I'm notorious for it. It's a really bad habit, and it's not something I'm proud of. It's definitely something that I should have already worked on in my 34 years of life. But there we go.
It hasn't held you back. Hey Oli, thanks for coming on the show.
Cool, no problem, Mark. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for listening. I'm your host, Business Applications MVP Mark Smith, also known as the NZ365 guy. If there's a specific Microsoft guest you'd like to see on the show, maybe you've heard they got a good story, it would be a value to the audience, please let me know. Message me on LinkedIn. That would be great. Please like and subscribe on your favorite podcast player if you want to hear more like this. And if you'd like to leave a review, go to nz365guy.com/review. Otherwise, stay safe and see you next time.